coming to you. Comment down below. Welcome aboard the RSS commentary. I am your host, Captain Cale McCollough, and in today's top news story, Joe Biden, absolutely false, end quote, Biden pressured Ukraine to cede land to Russia to avoid war, according to Jen Psaki. Reports claimed the Biden administration wanted Ukraine to cede autonomy of eastern territory that belonged and controlled to the Russian-backed separatists. So this is a prime example of why you can't just have illegal immigration and open borders. So Russia took over Crimea because they sent their citizens to mass illegally immigrate into Crimea, and it only takes about 3 to 6% of a population in order to stage a political coup. You got to think, 3 to 6% of the U.S. population is like 10 to 20 million people, and if they all conspired together, they could rig our political system. So they wanted Crimea because Russia wanted access to the Black Sea, because it's crucial that they be able to get their supplies in and out. So the United Nations foolishly decided that they would just let them take Crimea because they didn't want to risk a nuclear war, and that if they just gave Putin what he wanted, he just wanted access to the Black Sea, then Hitler would be appeased and he wouldn't take over any more European territories. And, well, they say that history does not repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme sometimes. Russia is preparing to invade Kiev and take over a large percentage of Ukraine. And they have very active propaganda outlets pushing propaganda because they want the U.S. to respond a certain way. I personally think that China Joe Biden is a foreign asset. I think he's one of the most corrupt politicians in the history of the United States, because his crackhead son, Hunter Biden, he likes to smoke crack cocaine, and when he runs out, he said he's smoked more Parmesan cheese than anybody else. So he likes to, when he's coming down from smoking all this Parmesan cheese, he likes to have sex with hookers. That laptop that big tech tried to suppress had all kinds of dirt on him. Turns out that China Joe Biden has been taking millions of dollars. He's had access to, his son was selling access to the president to the Chinese, to the Ukrainian energy firm Burisma, and Joe Biden had access to the bank account. So he's guilty on all counts. Guilty, guilty, guilty. And so what is this guy going to be doing for the rest of his presidency? He's going to be trying to cover up for this disastrous exit from Afghanistan. And here in this next story from Fox News, U.S. to keep troops in Iraq for foreseeable future, top commander says. So they have about 2,500 troops in Iraq. They're defending Iraq from ISIS, but they left Afghanistan overnight, leaving like $85 billion worth of military equipment that went into the hands of the Taliban and ISIS. And this is why we call him Joe Magoo Biden, aka the streaking White House groper, the one who streaks around the White House naked and gropes women. Most people are absolutely shocked to hear this. They think, no, you're just making stuff up. No, it's actually true. Look it up. Joe Magoo Biden he groped a Secret Service agent's girlfriend at a White House event, and the Secret Service had to hold back from him beating up then Vice President Biden. So he is known, and he likes to streak around the White House, so he is officially the streaking White House groper. And there is Ashley Biden's diary, which alleges that he molested his daughter, which makes him Chimo Joe. So it's a very fitting name. Here, let's head on to this next story over here from the New York Post. Appeals court rules against Trump bid to keep January's... Oh, wait, hold on. Sorry, it's out of order. I am writing my own RSS reader for us, so this doesn't happen. But it's really hard to sort. From the Gateway Pundit, Oregon COVID Nazis... Wait, where? Sorry, from the New York Post, African reporter presses Psaki on racist Omicron... Wait, hold on. Apologize. These are out of order. My app, I can edit it. Sorry. Next story from Newsweek. China warns U.S. allies that it will pay a price for diplomatic boycott of Winter Olympics in 2022. The U.S. is boycotting the Genocide Olympics there in Xinjiang, where they have the touch and feel of cotton, and it feels like genocide. The touch, the feel of cotton, it feels like genocide. And Evergrande is set to default on a $260 million loan. This is coming from the Daily Mail. Embattled Chinese property giant Evergrande will officially be declared in default for the first time, as it admits it won't be able to repay all of its debts. And if you haven't been following this, this is similar to the stock market crash of 2006, where there was a real estate bubble and there was a bunch of greedy people and they were mismanaging the money, being greedy capitalists there in quote-unquote communist China. Because, you know, in communist China, it's totally normal for them to be running capitalist-style businesses that are using Chinese as slave labor, where you have a cult of personality, top-down cult of state rule by elites and oligarchs and powerful backroom capitalists that pull the Chinese Communist Party members' strings like puppets. And what this could mean is that right now, the United States is experiencing the worst inflation since the 1980s. In the 1980s, if you're unfamiliar, there was the crack epidemic, and this, many speculate, is due to the CIA flooding the ghettos with crack cocaine. There's a story about Freeway Rick Ross, you might have heard of him, bringing in semi-trucks full of CIA crack into the ghetto. And what is speculated is that the Democrats were back in the day, they were the KKK and the white nationalists. They wanted the whites only at those states, and they were doing the forced sterilization on people. And so they legalized abortion for the purpose of forced sterilization. And then they flooded the cracks with ghettos because they were trying to reduce the birth rates of the non-whites and the poor whites because they were white supremacists, ultra ethno-nationalists. And then this caused the birth rate of the United States to tank. It went from about 3.3 down to 1.84 in the 80s. And then it went down, and then there was all this hyperinflation because there was all the me generation was just grabbing the pots of money, and then these people weren't replacing the numbers, so they started trending downwards. And then COVID hit, and the baby boomers are dying off, so we don't have them in the workforce, and they did the war on drugs, which devastated my generation, and it caused our generation to not get the same opportunities as the prior generations. And then you got COVID that hit, and it's like a perfect storm here with Evergrande defaulting on its debt because most Chinese income is held in properties, and Evergrande was one of the big corporations. They're like the Blackwater, or not Blackwater, that's the military one, the BlackRock. They're like BlackRock. They manage a large amount of money and real estate, and when the supply chain's already crippled, Biden wants to ban or enforce the vaccine mandate on truck drivers coming from other countries, and it's going to cripple our supply chain, which has already been crippled by these unlawful vaccine mandates. And then when this giant falls over, depending on what the Chinese government is going to do, this could trigger a very, very bad financial crisis. It would be a crash. It would be the worst that we've seen in our lifetime. We've also spent as much money as we've spent on every single war combined recently to fight a virus that, when you take out all the deaths that were over the average age of death, are about the same number of deaths as there are alcohol overdoses. And people are like, oh, well, people are going to the hospital. Well, people also go to the hospital from alcohol, too. A lot of them go to the hospital from alcohol and other drug overdoses. So the risk is about the same if you're under the age of death as drinking alcohol, which people drink all the time. We found that to be an acceptable risk. And this has just crippled our economy. This overreaction to COVID combined with the supply chain crisis, and then when the real estate bubble pops in China, because they don't have a social safety net there, it's going to cause a domino effect. So now is time to invest in made in America products. They're some of the most resilient products to the supply chain crisis. As long as we don't have to get it off of a boat here, then it's not the same as all of these boats that are unable to get the products onto the shelf in time. So let's just pray that this doesn't blow up in our face. Then moving on to some COVID stuff. Here in this next article from the New York Post, the World Health Organization warns Omicron variant poses very high, quote, very high, unquote, risk of infection worldwide. They want you to be scared. They're saying there's a new variant. It's like, okay, so how many variants have we had already? You're like, okay, so like The only variant that I knew about was the Delta variant, right? I mean, I knew there was other kinds of variants. I just didn't know which one it was. And then it popped up as Delta, right? And then there was a bunch of other mutations. And then next thing you know, it's the Z virus, XI, as in the Greek letter XI. But they didn't want to, the World Health Organization is in the pockets of the Chinese. And they did not want to offend the dictator Winnie the Pooh, who kind of looks like Xi Jinping and Winnie the Pooh. So they named it the Omicron Virus. So you better be afraid of the Omicron, because the Xi virus is going to be followed by the final variant, the Jinping variant, aka communism. Now we go up to this other one. Sorry. And here, the next article from the Gateway Pundit. Oregon COVID Nazis force kindergartners to eat outside in 40-degree weather. 100% fed up. Rules for 3, but not for me. Once again, from the Oregon Democrat Governor Kate Brown. She was photographed maskless while indoors attending a LGBTQ Victory Fund's 30th anniversary. I live in Oregon, and this woman is insane. I think she's definitely part of the nanny state. She believes that the state knows better how to manage your life than you, because she wants to spend other people's money to get people to vote for her. That's the way this woman works. They are enforcing a mask mandate, even though Florida has one of the lowest rates of infections and deaths in the entire country, because infection rates don't mean death rates. They're not the same thing. A higher infection rate with a lower death rate is preferred over a higher death rate with a lower infection rate, so that we can achieve herd immunity, which requires asymptomatic transfer of the virus, which after you've taken a vaccine, it becomes a booster. But I guess I'm required to tell you that vaccines lower the infection rate, and the limited data that they have through the rushed process of approving the vaccine has showed a lower death rate. But this doesn't really apply to children. In fact, it can be deemed as child abuse. When you force a child to wear a mask all day, it can give them a speech impediment. It's just not necessary. We've had these teachers' unions absolutely just being the worst. The public schools are failing. They want to blame systemic racism when really it's lack of competition. They need charter schools that can cater to the needs of the students, that can prevent students from falling through the cracks. But they don't want that, because they want the state to control everything. But the problem with this is that there's this Supreme Court ruling called Troxel v. Granville. The case involved a grandparent who was trying to get visitation rights to see their child, and the Supreme Court said that the parents have free association and free speech. They have the right to control and care of their child, which is aka custody of their child. And in order in order for the state to abridge the fundamental right, the state is required to show clear and convincing evidence that this action is required. Because you have a First Amendment right. It says you have a right to free speech, and religion, right to freedom of the press, the right to freedom of assembly, to petition the government. In order to take away these rights, the state has to go through a process. And in that process, there is an evidentiary requirement. And that evidentiary requirement is not a preponderance of the evidence. It is clear and convincing evidence requirement, which is slightly below beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, this stuff came about in 2001, and nobody's really questioned the state on this, because once this passed, all the states had to change their laws. But most states did not respect the evidentiary requirement because they said this is a child visitation right case. So this doesn't apply. This is not true. No, the case specifically says in order to deprive you of your First Amendment rights, which includes custody of your children, they gotta go through a process to do that. They can't just do it, right? Like, they can, but there's a process to doing that. And to do that, you have to show with clear and convincing evidence, it's clear and convincing that you have to do this. This never happened with COVID. It was all a overreaction from the nanny state trying to show you exactly how good they're doing and how racist Donald Trump and Republicans are, even though it was the Democrats that started the KKK because they owned slaves. They were the ultra-nationalist, ultra-ethno-nationalist, whites-only white nationalists, the white supremacists. But people have a short, limited generational memory, and so these memories are gone, and now the Democrat demagogues have convinced you that it's the Republicans who are racist. So these people who are trying to stop the mask mandates, they're just some far-right, conservative activist parent who is trying to push their politics. And then their politics is anti-racism, feminism, LGBTQ, ABCD, EFG, HIJK, LMNOP, and all of the other wonderful thousands of genders now that they have created. And they want you to treat each one of them differently because they want to have all of the benefits of being a woman without any sort of benefit of being a man or being gay. They want equality, which means they want what the straight white man wants. So they got to use this critical race and gender theory to break us down, to demoralize us, the same way that the United States has used propaganda in other countries to demoralize them, like they did in the Soviet Union, in order to get them to give up. And this is, when you see a repeated piece of propaganda from a political party, you must then assume that this repeated piece of propaganda is part of a greater agenda, that they are trying to solidify their power, because that's the way that Democrats operate. Here, let's move on to the next article here. The World Health, from the Times of Israel, the World Health Organization warns against vaccine hoarding amid fears of Omicron variant. UN's top immunization official urges well-stocked countries to ease off on the booster shots, enabling other countries to get an initial dose. So they don't want you to get the monoclonal antibody treatment because their political agenda is they want you to get the vaccine, because the people that are calling the shots are Pfizer executives, Moderna executives that are running the FDA approval process, giving Joe Biden and his cronies these shady backroom deals so that they can become rich off of these vaccines. And they say it's not enough. Here's from this next article from the Daily Mail. 2 vaccine doses may not be enough to protect against the Z coronavirus variant, says Pfizer. So you must get another booster to prepare for the Jinping variant. And so what exactly are they saying? Like how many more boosters are they saying? How many more boosters do they want? We just got to continue getting boosters here into the near future. I think the last I heard, a Pfizer executive was saying that we need to get 4 boosters. So what they want is they want zero COVID. They want you to lock down. They want you to give up having meeting partners, having kids, give up your job, give up your home. They want you to lose your home because you can't pay rent, or you can't kick the tenant out for not paying rent. And they want you to pay more for all of your products, and so that you can have this zero COVID policy. But you never, ever, ever hear about them talking about the obesity epidemic that's causing most of the deaths, because most of the people who are dying in the hospitals, like 3/4 or more of these, more than 3/4 of the people who are dying and getting hospitalized are obese. They're very out of shape. And the real epidemic is the obesity epidemic, for sure, because my immune system works perfectly fine without the vaccine. In fact, it's, like I had the flu once. I had the H1, it must have been H1N1. I don't know what it was, but I felt like I was gonna die. I was like shivering, and I should have gone to the hospital. It was like horrible experience. And I knew that from then on, the flu was deadly. More deadly than you think. But we never really dealt with it or bothered with it, because the way the immune system works is not through like getting infected once and then, or like getting a vaccine once. Like, it requires repeated exposure in order to get herd immunity, because the viruses mutate rapidly. Now we've got how many different viruses? We're almost at the Jinping variant, the communism variant of the virus. And so the more it mutates, the more probability chance it's going to become not deadly anymore. Because it's going to need to mutate from this current spike protein to another protein that our bodies aren't able to detect. And then, so it could become really deadly, or it might just fizzle out. And so we don't know in the future what's actually going to happen. We don't know if it's going to get more deadly or less deadly, but we do know there's a death rate of about, at most, on average, 250 deaths per 100,000 people. So you do the math on it, turns out to be about 1 million deaths total. So we're actually capped out on the number of deaths that we have before it either mutates to become an even more deadly strand, or it starts to become endemic and it's no longer problematic. It's like more or less deadly than the flu is. So the more contagious it is doesn't mean that it's going to be more deadly. This Omicron variant, as far as we're aware, is not very deadly at all, not causing hospitalizations and deaths like the other variants are causing. So these act as natural vaccines. But I am required to tell you, because of the crazy, insane, lunatic leftists in Silicon Valley, they want to push their politics, and they want me to tell you that the vaccines do lower the infection rate, and they do lower the death rates in the target groups. And if you are in the target groups, you might want to get the vaccine. But if you're not, then, it should be free. You should be able to go about your life without having the government destroy the economy and destroy our livelihoods in order to try to protect people who are mostly obese and over the average age of death, because that just doesn't make sense. Moving on to the next article from Newsweek. Omicron seems mild so far, but people will die from it. The World Health Organization Maria Van Kerkhove warns. WHO COVID technical lead Maria Van Kerkhove has cautioned again, referring to the G variant symptoms as mild following some early data on its severity. But Joe Biden locked down travel from Africa. And, you remember the public outcry when there was the Muslim travel ban. Now he has implemented the N-word travel ban. Since it comes from Africa, it is extra deadly because Joe Biden is a racist and he stereotypes Africans as dangerous. That's exactly what he's doing here, because there was no evidence at all that this virus was more deadly. So essentially what he did was he banned them because they were black. Here in this next article from Breitbart, supply chain nightmare. U.S. to enforce strict vaccine mandate for all border crossers in January. President China Joe Biden will demand all essential foreign travelers entering the U.S. across land borders be fully vaccinated beginning on January 22nd. The administration is planning to announce. And so this excludes all of the illegal migrants that are traveling in the back of the vehicles, as well as crossing the border on foot. And so the rules are for thee and not for me. You should wear an mask, but not me. I guess that's kind of the way it goes in Joe Magoo land. Here, this next article from Fox News. Senate rejects Biden vaccine mandate for businesses with two Democrats joining Republicans. So they never ever passed any of this stuff through Congress. They're supposed to have a process in order to deprive you of your rights. Some dude up in a government agency can't just decide based on a preponderance of the evidence that they want to lock us down or force us to get a vaccine mandate if we have a job. If you don't have a job, you don't got to get the vaccine mandate. No, it only applies to the tax-paying citizens. No, it doesn't apply to the people who are living on government handouts who aren't working because they are either unable to, or they are able-bodied and they're just exploiting the system. And it only applies to the people who are paying the bill. Because let's be real, this is exactly what it is the rules are for thee and they are not for me. This next article from the Daily Mail. Federal judge blocks Biden's last remaining COVID mandate rule on contractors. Judge Stan Baker in Savannah, Georgia, on Tuesday blocked the final remaining vaccine mandate ordered by Biden, which would have made federal contractors get their COVID-19 shot. This next article from Newsweek. Trump denies Mark Meadows' claims that he had COVID during Biden debate. It's, quote, fake news, end quote. Former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows had alleged that COVID tested positive for COVID-19 3 days before his presidential debate. I don't know. You know, you got to take his word for it. I don't trust pretty much anybody who's trying to put out a book to get money on Trump. Here in this next article from Fox News, Bloomberg Politics ripped for pushing, quote, CCP narratives, and, quote, after suggesting China's COVID approach is vindicated. Bloomberg Politics was torn apart on Twitter after the self-described non-partisan news outlets suggested that China was, quote, vindicated, and, quote, for their approach to containing COVID-19 after the discovery of the new ... You know, you just can't have any respect for Mr. Bloomberg. He's absolutely politically biased. He's Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York. Like, it's not just like some nerdy journalist over here. You've got a person who runs his business based on stock trading machines that operate out of China, where you're not allowed to criticize the government, all right? So I'm calling BS on it right now. That one piece of evidence is enough to call complete BS on Mr. Mike Bloomberg. He is a liar. He is a political hack. Bloomberg has been putting out Trump derangement syndrome content for a long time. I've covered a lot of fake news articles from Bloomberg that were very, very, very politically biased. Just because you're putting out some spin from the other side, when you're putting out spin from your side, doesn't mean that you're non-biased. No, it actually means that you're actually incredibly biased. Where is it? I think. Sorry. There it is. All right. I guess the camera's messed up. So here in this next article from Gateway Pundit, San Francisco Mayor London Breed caught out partying, dancing, and mingling maskless while the rest of the city is forced to follow her indoor mask mandate. Here, can we get the picture? Here we can see a picture of the mayor here maskless with a drink in her hand, probably spreading coronavirus with the rest of the people at the what do they call that whenever everybody gets sick from COVID at the a super spreader. It's a super spreader over there. They're all like vaccinated up on the vaccines for the strand of COVID that aren't even around anymore, that don't work anymore on the new variants, thinking that they're going to be totally okay, that they can just not wear a mask, and then they go around having a super spreader. Because this is the way that these people operate, fundamentally. In this next article from Fox News, man who carried Nancy Pelosi's lectern on January 6 pleads guilty. Adam Johnson, a Florida man, photographed carrying a lectern belonging to U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office at the U.S. Capitol during the January 6th quote-unquote insurrection, pled guilty Monday for his part in the riot. Why is Fox News saying insurrection here? I mean, they probably should put quotes around that, because it definitely, more information is coming out that the FBI was instigating it. We have covered on this show the videos that were released during the trial. One of the trials for one of the defendants on January 6th, they got the state to release videos where the U.S. Capitol Police are letting the protesters into the Capitol building before outside there's like a bunch of disturbances that then caused the riot to happen. So let's look at this guy. We covered this one of the last shows before the show got taken down. Here is the podium guy. This is one of my favorite thumbnails here. I'll just give you a moment to just appreciate this scene here. And if that is not one of the coolest, one of the craziest images, I don't know if there's any crazier. I mean, check out a senator or the representative who like put the gas mask over his head. And then you have the QAnon shaman over there who thought that he could burn Trump and turn his back on the movement and say that he's sorry that he ever supported Trump and that he denounces him in order to get a reduced sentence. And then they hit him hard. I think he served like 40 some odd, more than 3-year sentence. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head exactly how long of a sentence he's serving, but it shows you if you work with these people, if you give them what they want, they're not actually going to treat you good. They're actually going to treat you really bad. It's going to be, you're going to be the one that's going to be regretting doing it for your entire life. They're going to be the ones who, they're going to continue to get more and more power, and they're going to continue to take more and more power, and they're going to continue to attack more and more people until it gets out of hand, which is why we got to stand up to these people, because there is a lot of information that the FBI, there's a lot of proof that the FBI did in fact instigate the riot. The U.S. Capitol Police were told ahead of time by the FBI that there was going to be a riot planned. The National Guard offered troops to the U.S. Capitol Police. The head of the U.S. Capitol Police is a BLM supporter, and he turned down the sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Here in this next article from the New York Post, Capitol Police watchdog warns more change needed after January 6th riot. Bolton told lawmakers that, quote, out of 200 security enhancements the department provided to the inspector general, only about 61 of those items have supporting documents to support that those enhancements have ... So the New York Police Department got word that there was a planned riot, and they warned the FBI. The FBI then warned the U.S. House Committee on Intelligence. They warned the head of the U.S. Capitol Police, who is a BLM supporter. The National Guard offered to have extra troops come, but the head of the U.S. Capitol Police turned them down. Some of the agents who were there, the FBI agents that were there, were involved in the kidnapping of Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, where FBI agents instigated Trump supporters to kidnap the governor of Michigan, which sounds like a crazy story out of a movie, like I'm some lunatic or something, but it's absolutely true. And the agents that were involved in that got promoted, and they were there on January 6th. There is this thing called the deep state, which sounds crazy at first, but the deep state they're holdout hires from prior generations. So like a president who's the opposite political party will have installed a bunch of people in government positions because the president is the chief executive of the United States. These people don't get fired whenever the presidency switches back to the other party. And so there's groups of people who are political radicals who like to use their power and to influence politics, such as when the deep state FBI attorney Kevin Clinesmith starts with a K, he falsified the FISA warrant to surveil Trump Tower, and they straight up lied. They had this Steele dossier where they said that Trump was colluding with the Russians, that there was these hookers, that they had sex with Trump, and they trashed this hotel room, and they peed it on there. And what happened was they paid these hookers to just trash this hotel room after Trump stayed there. And then they said that he was part of it. And they tried to make it seem like he was a Russian asset. And there was this guy, I think it's Igor Danchenko. Can't remember, but I-G-O-R, Igor. And he basically made up most of the stuff in the Steele dossier. It was a political hit piece paid for by the Clinton administration. And they rolled with it. The Clinton administration Hillary Clinton knew that it was a lie, and she went with it anyways. There was that email server where they deleted the 30,000 emails. Well, I mean, you know exactly what were in those emails now. They were doing all kinds of dirty stuff with the Clinton Foundation, and this group of attorneys, there was a number of them that were involved in this operation where they went to the FISA court and submitted false information, fraud upon the court. They broke the law and they got busted, and Kevin Kleinsmith didn't have to serve a sentence. But this is an example of deep state. There are people they're Democrats who were hired by prior administration, and they didn't get fired, and they live in and around the Washington, D.C. area. They have friends there, they have family there, and they give their friends and their family jobs, and they create a crony network. This is called, in political science, this is called a dual state. There's nothing suspicious about it. The dual state is a officially recognized thing. So deep state is not like a crack conspiracy theory. It's actually every country has a deep state. It exists, and the people live in and around centers of power, and these places become swamps. So we need to drain the swamp. I gotta move on. I got a Christmas party that I got to go to at a church. From this next article from the Gateway Pundit, turncoat Mike Pence on January 6th, I said, I believe there were irregularities, but I did the right thing, and quote, and this is a video. It says, "Time's up, Mike. We've seen enough. You just don't have what it takes." Turncoat Mike Pence spoke with CBN News this week. He now says there was irregularities in the 2020 election, but it was up to the ... So there was Mark Zuckerberg did pay $500 million to do a private takeover of county election offices in swing states. It's actually true. And in these states, Trump lost by less than 10,000 votes. Most of these votes came in all at one time in ballot dumps where they had these privately funded ballot harvesting boxes paid for by Mark Zuckerberg. And they were packed very densely in Democrat cities, and in Republican areas, they were packed very sparsely because he was not trying to give the U.S. government $500 million in taxes. You know, he didn't pay $500 million out of the kindness of his heart. He did it because he wanted Trump out of office so that he could give an illegal campaign donation to Joe Biden, because Donald Trump wanted to reform Section 230, wanted to break up big tech. Joe Biden wants to use big tech to censor Republicans so that you don't get information like this, so that you don't get the real news. They censor that with their AI bots, where they use unsupervised learning. It's got unlabeled data sets. A human didn't go through and label it. They used some AI algorithm to auto-generate it so they could save money. And they just created a flood of false positive. They just said all these stuff is harassment, bullying, hate speech. And they just took the video down because they couldn't just say, I'm just going to take the video down because we don't want it on our platform. They had to make up a lie saying that this content was dangerous content, even though they never really manually reviewed it. So the people who were doing the Russiagate investigations, Kamala Harris sat on the Russiagate investigation. They used the Russiagate investigation to get big tech to censor Republicans who were warning people that there was going to be fraud with the mail-in voting. There was the attorney general from the state of California. His first name's Xavier. He was friends with Kamala Harris. He wrote letters to the heads of the big tech agencies saying, we're going to come down hard on you if you don't help censor the Republicans who are talking about mail-in voting fraud. And so this did not pass the Help America Vote Act. So Mike Pence, I think so one, there's the theory that they're controlled opposition, that Trump is just working for some group of billionaires. I'm not going to go down that. I don't think that he's a Russian asset. That I do think that he speaks what he thinks, and that he knows that from working with people who built buildings like normal people. He just talked to them, and then he knew what they wanted, what mattered to them. So let's see. Because Mark Zuckerberg took over the election offices, and because state officials were contacting the heads of the big tech corporations, forcing them to take down information related to the election. This did not pass the Help America Vote Act, Help America, or the HAVA, H-A-V-A. This was passed in 2002 after the election with George Bush. They did there's like this clearinghouse where they have to publish information, and this is a voluntary process, okay? Are you following me? So there's the Help America Vote Act, and there's a clearinghouse where there's voluntary actions where the state volunteers that they're going to cooperate with, like voter registration database, voter machine registration. So in order to certify the voting machines, they have a manual, and this manual means that like it has to be a state employee who's running it. If it's not a state employee, you have to add that to the voting machine certification process. The states signed on to this voluntarily. A lot of them signed on, not every single one, to some of these measures. And so I think that Mike Pence did the right thing with the information that he had available, because Sidney Powell was a crackpot. That stuff about the Dominion voting machines, I believe, was disinformation designed to discredit all of the information around Mark Zuckerberg's private takeover of the election offices. They want you to think that there's no voting machine fraud with the Dominion machines. They did the recount. So they did ballot harvesting. They did the Zucker boxes, the privately funded ballot harvesting boxes, where they harvested the ballots, and then they harvested the ballots and with private ballot harvesting boxes. So the chain of custody before it went into the Dominion voting machines was broken. And it did not pass the approval of the states, because some of the states had done some stuff where they didn't approve of all the changes before the election for the mail-in voting. Some of the other states, they did not put in the clearinghouse that Zuckerberg made the donations. And so I don't believe that the states actually elected Donald Trump, or China Joe Biden. I don't think that it was, because it was in violation. The states actually did not do that. A number of the states had multiple electors, or dual electors, where the state legislator said whatever that like the state legislator did not approve that. And so there's some stuff about, like those states had passed some laws that they got mail-in voting, and there's like a popular vote. And so these things don't match exactly with the Electoral College, because the legislators of the states are supposed to send these electors to the Congress, and there was dual electors. I think combined with the Help America Vote Act violations and the dual electors, that Mike Pence was in the wrong, that he should not have certified the election, because what he's saying was that he didn't want to question the election because it would have caused a lot of problems. But the problem is that the election's already in question. Like, what he did made us question it even more, because, you've got the riot that happened where the FBI are like stoking up the riot. We got to move on. I have to get out of here. I'm not going to be able to cover all the stories that I wanted to. Hear from the next article from Fox News. Greater Georgia demands accountability on Zuckerberg's $5.6 million donation to Raffensperger in 2020 election. Zuckerberg, the one who privately funded the Zucker box ballot harvesting boxes in the swing states that almost certainly was the reason why China Joe Biden was elected president. He was giving a lot of money to a lot of different candidates. He's not donating this money out of the kindness of his heart. He's doing it because he wants to influence the election. And I think that there's a big problem with him doing it in multiple states, because what the Supreme Court said was that there's Citizens United, where there's like a group of people that put out this movie and they put too much money in that counted as a campaign donation. And then they said people have free speech. So Citizens United, I can understand the justification of why they would do that. But I mean, it's quite obvious that, it's going to invite a lot of dark money to have foreign governments then come into our elections, have billionaires pay for the elections, and then it's no longer a democracy. So, but this, Zuckerberg and his wife, Priscilla Chan, spent a total of $45 million in Georgia during the 2020 election cycle, which included January 2021 Senate runoff, and a watchdog group reported in June that it notably boosted Democrat turnout in the peach state. See, this is why it's like a Trojan horse, because they're doing the Citizens United thing where they're like, okay, well, I'm just trying to put out a documentary about Hillary Clinton and about how corrupt she is, because she is actually one of the most corrupt people in the history of United States politics. Up there with George Soros and Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey. So the idea is that it's just free speech. They're not trying to get a particular candidate elected. They're just trying to put out information. When they're doing all this stuff with the money that they're putting in, that's over the campaign donation limit, they're not working to get one candidate elected. But that's the problem, is that he was trying to work to get Joe Magoo Biden elected. He was. There's no questions asked that Mark Zuckerberg was, in fact, working with other big tech executives and a cabal, a shadow campaign, as in the Times article, the shadow campaign that, quote unquote, fortified Joe Biden by suppressing Trump and censoring Republicans, trying to say that it has no coordination, that it's just a bunch of people acting independently of each other. But the problem is that like big tech is mostly in Silicon Valley, where there's an incestuous relationship among the CEOs and the executives and the investors and the employees who go bouncing back from corporation to corporation. And they are pushing far left Democrat socialist politics. It is actually a shared political objective that these people have. And he definitely was not paying $500 million out of the kindness of his heart. This was not a tax donation to get us to help out the country. This was Mark Zuckerberg paying $500 million to get Joe Magoo Biden elected. It was a campaign donation. It was illegal. And then he also did this in Georgia. And I think that there's got to be some sort of problem, like whenever he's pushing this propaganda in multiple states, wherever you have multiple operations going on in multiple states, like that's not, like citizens don't have operations that are organized in multiple states. Like this isn't a normal thing. I don't know what to do. I mean, this is corruption. This is what the Democrats want, because they were the white supremacists, white nationalists who started the KKK. They owned slaves back in the day. They were always pushing this racial superiority, demagoguery, doing the forced sterilization. They did the war on drugs. They were the people who said there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, that we had to invade Iraq and Afghanistan, because the Democrats had controlled U.S. Congress for hundreds of years. It wasn't until recently when Republicans got control over the Congress for a very limited time. And whenever they did that, they still had control over the military apparatus because they had been in control of it for hundreds of years. And then we had the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then the Democrats blamed everything on the Republicans. It was like it's like they gaslit us. We got to move on. I got to go as soon as possible to a Christmas party. Here in this next article from the Daily Mail, Roger Stone will plead the fifth in January 6th investigation. Roger Stone has informed the House committee investigating January 6th that's run by Democrats that he will plead the Fifth Amendment and he will not offer deposition on turnover documents. This next article from Breitbart, hybrid warfare, Poland predicts long drawn out Belarus border crisis. The Polish government officials Stanislaw Zarin has predicted the migrant crisis on the border of Belarus might last for a long time, adding the conflict may be, quote, cynical ploy and, quote, orchestrated by the Belarusian ... Oops. By the Bulgarian services facilitating the incursion attempts to, quote, to exhaust our soldiers and officers. If you haven't been following this, they're amping up the hostility against the illegal migrants. They're spraying them with hoses and shooting them with paintballs, and they are using military-style tactics on them because Europe has had enough of, they hit the breaking point. I don't blame them. I think they've gone a little bit hard. They kind of just went from like, oh yeah, we're welcoming all the migrants over to like, we're shooting them on the border with paintball guns and spraying them with hoses and spraying them with mace and stuff. I think that was, I don't live there. It's not my border. Maybe that's a little bit harsh. I think maybe, but it's getting pretty bad. The crime's skyrocketing through the roof. It's like, there's only, you can only take so many of these migrants before the system starts to break down. And then they're not going to get the quality of life that they came here to get. And then they're going to be a threat of radicalization. Whenever people are coming somewhere to get a dream and then they become a permanent underclass and they're deprived of what they thought they were coming when they came there, they can become a terrorist threat pretty easily. They can become radicalized. So I don't really blame them. They're defending their own country. But yeah, it was a little bit shocking to see the how military they went. They just went from like zero to paintballs, mace, and water cannons in like a very small period of time. All right, so I got to get out of here. I could be up here all night, but I do have a Christmas party to go to. So what do I do? All right. Thank you very much for tuning in to RSS Commentary on Friday, December 10th, 2021. Again, I am your host, Cale McCollough. And until next time, farewell, sayonara, aloha, peace be with you, and Godspeed in your journey.